Can I just ask, how many people in this room came to the Singularity New Zealand Summit? Okay, a handful. How many people in this room have never heard me speak before? Awesome. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about, I actually spoke at ITx 2 years ago, and I spoke about exponential tech, and I'm going to condense the basics of that in the first part of this presentation, but then I'm going to go into what I think are some of the implications for all of us in terms of leadership. So we'll start with just the basics of what we're talking about when we talk about exponential technology. And really what we're talking about comes down to three kind of core insights. And these are insights that I got from my time at Singularity University, largely from Ray Kurzweil, one of the founders of Singularity University. Ray, if you're not familiar with him, he's really kind of a titan of the tech world. He invented pretty much everything. He invented flatbed scanners. He invented optical character recognition. He invented text-to-speech for blind people. He invented the Kurzweil synthesizer. He's got 21 honorary doctorates. He's received honors from 3 US presidents. He's written 7 books, 5 of them bestsellers. He's a director of engineering at Google. As my friend Andy would say, pull your head in, mate, no one likes an overachiever. Anyway, but so these 3 insights come largely from Ray and his perspective and philosophies on exponential technological progression. And the first one starts with this guy. This is Gordon Moore. He's one of the co-founders of Intel, and in 1965, as many of you will know, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 months as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we could see. This became known as Moore's Law. I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of it. The first insight comes from Ray Kurzweil, and what Kurzweil said was, hang on a minute, what if it's not actually about the transistors at all? Fun fact you may not know about Moore's Law, Gordon Moore made his famous prediction based on a data set of 4. He had 4 data points, but Kurzweil zoomed out on that and he said, hang on a minute, what if instead of looking at the number of transistors we can fit on an integrated circuit, we look instead at what we might call the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Turns out that number has been doubling for almost 120 years. Starting way back with the beginning of computing with electromechanical punch cards, moving on to relays and then vacuum tubes and then transistors and only then integrated circuits. Moore's Law is actually the 5th iteration of this underlying doubling paradigm, not the first. Kurzweil called it the law of accelerating returns. That's insight number 1. It's not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2 is that it's not just about computing. This doubling phenomenon applies to any technology once it becomes what we call information enabled. Think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate enabled. It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happened, it started to follow a doubling in price performance, much like computing. The first digital camera had a resolution of 0.01 megapixel. Today you can get a 41 megapixel camera as part of a smartphone. So some of the technologies that have become information enabled and are now starting to follow doubling curves, computing obviously the base one, but also artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, gene sequencing, neuroscience, energy, all becoming powered by information, powered by ones and zeros, and all starting to follow similar doubling curves. So what's so important about a doubling curve? Well, turns out they actually have a few characteristics that make them kind of imperative to pay attention to, and the first one is that they look flat for a really long time. And you'll know this if you've ever tried to do that trick where you fold a piece of paper in half 8 times. Anybody ever try that trick? First fold is easy, second fold is easy, third fold is easy, easy, easy. You're like, this trick is so dumb. Why am I even doing it? So easy. It's not until you hit that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper that things start to get a little crazy. And so these curves are inherently deceptive as the technology is going from 0.01 to 0.02 to 0.04 to 0.08. Sure, it's doubling, but from the outside, it still effectively looks like 0. The second characteristic is that our brains are totally not wired for this stuff. We evolved on the savannah chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in a predictable, linear fashion. We evolved to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to that end of the room, not to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to the moon. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear, no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself, twice, said that Moore's law was over. Both times proven wrong. Like the guy who invented the law. He can't get his own law right. So I don't know what hope the rest of us have. I have to stress how difficult it is to get your head around doubling curves. And to do this, I'm just going to tell a story. You might have heard this story before. This story may or may not be true. It doesn't matter. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. This is a story about the inventor of chess. The inventor of chess, when he had invented his game, he went to the king and he said, "Sire, I have invented this game and I wish to gift it to you for the benefit of the kingdom." And the king said, "What a wondrous thing indeed you have wrought. I wish to reward you. How would you like to be rewarded?" And the inventor of chess said, "I am but a humble man. I ask for not much, merely a single grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, and 2 on the second, and 4 on the third, and so on until the board should be complete." And the king thought to himself, "This man is a wonderful inventor of games, but he has no idea how to value his creations." And he readily agreed to the inventor's request. You can, of course, guess where this is going. By the time they got to the end of the chessboard, the king owed the inventor of chess 18 quintillion grains of wheat. Put all those together and chuck them on a scale, it comes out to 1.2 trillion metric tons of wheat. And to put that in context, the entire global output of wheat last year was 753 million metric tons. So it's like 1,600 times the entire global output of wheat for all of last year. If you laid all of those grains of wheat end to end, they would reach Alpha Centauri and back. And the critical thing that I want you to understand is how difficult it is to wrap your head around this stuff. And I want you to think about, where do you think we would be when we were halfway through the process, when we are at square 32? Because the tricky thing about exponential tech is that it's really hard to measure progress as you go. So halfway through this process, we've got 64 squares on the board. We know that when we get to square 64, we're looking at 1.2 trillion metric tons. Where do you think we're going to be when we're 32 squares in? So I look at this and I'm like, okay, so 32 squares in, we're halfway. That's 1.2 trillion, so half of that's 600 billion, but it's exponential. So it's definitely, maybe we'll reduce it by an order of magnitude. Let's say 600 million. Actually, let's reduce it by another order. Let's say it's 600,000, because I know this stuff catches you out all the time, and I really want to be extra conservative. Let's just even reduce it. Let's just say it's 100,000, because I want to be super, super conservative about it. The actual number is 279. It is so hard to wrap your head around this stuff. And so when we see exponential curves in action, we have to be systematic and disciplined in our assessment and our analysis of them if we want to have a hope of being able to respond effectively. When I first came back from Singularity University 3.5 years ago, I started giving these talks, and I would always talk about some whiz-bangy technology, like, oh my gosh, can you believe this tech is already here? That's not what's important about what I have to say. It's not about what technology is available at any given point in time. The critical thing that I'm looking at is how technology changes over time. And that's the key takeaway when you're looking at any new technology, is not where is it today, but what is the rate of change? And judging by that rate of change, how can we skate to where the puck is going, to use some ice hockey, soccer time. So I should probably use some soccer analogy, but I don't know anything about soccer, so you're stuck with ice hockey. So now I'm going to give you an example of this change over time using one example, which is the game of Go. So I'm sure you're familiar with this I guess it was May of 2016. DeepMind's Alphago artificially intelligent Go player beat the world champion Lee Sedol at the game of Go. Amazing accomplishment, fully a decade before the researchers expected it to happen. And you may have also heard that last year, DeepMind came out with a new artificially intelligent Go player called Alphago 0. So the original Alphago beat Lee Sedol 4 games to 1, which is a huge accomplishment. Alphago 0, a year later, beat the original Alphago 100 games to 0, which by itself is already an amazing feat. But the critical thing here is how they trained it. right? So you guys, I'm sure, already know that typically with an AI, if you want to train it, you feed it lots of data, right? If you want to train it to recognize pictures of cats, you feed it millions of pictures of cats and millions of pictures of not cats. You say, these are cats, these are not cats, and the AI can parse all that data and go, okay, so cats have, pointy ears, but maybe one of them's chewed off, or maybe there's another animal that has pointy ears. So you also have to know that they have eyes that are shaped like this, and whisker and nose that looks like this, etc. But maybe it's just me holding up a cat mask in front of my face, so you also have to know that its body looks like this and the tail, right? So then it's able to parse all that stuff and go, okay, this is a cat, this is a not cat. Or a not hot dog if you're a Silicon Valley fan. So with the original Alphago, that's exactly how they trained it. They fed it 40 million historic games of Go, it parsed all of that data, and it comes out going, yep, in any given context, this is the best move for me to make. And in fact, in game 3 of this 5-game series against Lee Sedol, Alphago came out with a move that was so wildly unexpected that the observers said it's broken. It doesn't know what it's doing. And Lee Sedol himself got up and left the room for 15 minutes because he knew he had lost. It was this completely left field move. It was so bizarre that nobody saw it coming. And the only game that he won, that Lee Sedol won, was game 4 because he made a left field move that was inspired by Alphago. Okay, that's the Alphago. But with Alphago 0, they didn't feed it a single game. They gave it the rules, and they gave it the desired outcome. And they let it play itself. It played itself, starting with random play. Literally any move will do. Played itself 3.9 million times, and within 3 days was the best Go player in the world. It's not about technology. It's about change over time. Okay, so insight number 1, not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2, it's not just about computing, it's about any information-enabled technology. And insight number 3 is that these technologies are now starting to converge. So now we have to consider what happens when an exponential progression in artificial intelligence converges with an exponential progression in robotics. What happens when an exponential progression in biotechnology or bioengineering converges with an exponential progression in 3D printing at the molecular level, when we can literally print matter molecule by molecule? And of course, what happens is that everything accelerates even faster. I spend a lot of my time awake at night worrying about various things that are going on in the world, and I kind of feel like if I'm awake at night, you should be too. Sorry, misery loves company. So I'm going to share with you just 4 of the things that keep me up at night when I think about this world that we're heading into and the rate of change that we're seeing in terms of technology. And the first one is technological unemployment. In 2013, a now famous paper from Frey and Osborne suggested that 47 to 81% of jobs as we currently understand them would be under threat from technology within 20 years. In 2015, the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand said that number was 46% of New Zealand jobs. This is a factory in Shanghai, a photo from earlier this year. They can deliver 200,000, process 200,000. It's a company called JD.com. It's like a Chinese Amazon. They're worth $55 billion. They can process 200,000 orders per day at this factory. They have 4 staff. 4 staff, entirely automated. I will say, though, that technological unemployment is one of those things that there are as many papers and positions on it as there are, I don't know, stars in the sky. Like, for every paper that says that robots are going to take all the jobs, there's a paper saying new jobs are going to be created. It's a hugely complex and nuanced discussion. It's one of those things that we should talk about over drinks until 2 in the morning. And what I can also tell you is that as of right now today, we are not seeing increased unemployment as a direct result of automation. What we are seeing as of right now today is increased inequality as a direct result of automation, and that's the second thing that keeps me up at night. A paper from the Brookings Institute earlier this year which basically came out demonstrating that we are seeing an ever greater concentration of wealth towards capital and away from labor, again, as a direct result of automation. We've been seeing this since the early 1970s, when for the first time in human history, we were able to decouple productivity growth from wage growth. And this is kind of a scary thing, because basically what this says to me is that if you are a politician, you can stand up on stage and say everything is awesome. Productivity is high, GDP is up, unemployment's down, we're doing a great job. Nothing to worry about. And yet for a huge chunk of the population, everything feels very much not awesome. And what happens when you have this huge disconnect between the kind of top-level narrative that's going on in terms of media and politicians and your lived experience, is that you get a backlash. You get, somebody like Trump elected to office. You get Brexit. You get Bernie Sanders. To a degree, you get Jacinda. Like, these are all kind of symptoms of the same general trend and trajectory, which is the system is not working for us. That's the second thing that keeps me up at night. The third thing that keeps me up at night is increased cyber risk. When everything is connected, everything is vulnerable. A couple months ago, some hackers got into a Las Vegas casino. They got in through a connected fish tank in the lobby. In May, like 2 months ago, a hack came out, Russian hackers that have put a virus into over 500,000 routers. And our response is wholly inadequate. We have no response for this. The official response from the FBI for this worm that is into all these routers that can read all of your data, all of your passwords, everything you're sending through these devices, the official response from the FBI is that everyone should try turning it off and turning it on again. Wholly inadequate. All right, that's the cybersecurity piece. But the fourth thing that keeps me up at night is the thing that I am most worried about, and that is the undermining of trust in civil society. If you've seen this video, you probably don't want to admit it. This is the face of Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, superimposed onto the body of a porn star. It was uploaded to a website called Step Siblings Caught, purporting to show her having sex with her stepbrother. This video was made using a technology called Deepfakes, which allows you to superimpose anyone's face on video of anyone else's body. When it first came out, you needed a fair amount of technical savvy in order to be able to process a video like this, but of course in about 10 minutes, somebody made a user-friendly version, so anyone can make a video of someone's face on someone else's body. And that can be fun. Like, you can make a video, for the non-technical among us. You can make a video of, your loved one starring in the Avengers. Like, that's kind of cool. But it obviously can also be used for malicious purposes. Combine that with technology we now have that allows you to use your face as a remote control for somebody else's face. So this guy on the right is using his face as a remote control for Donald Trump's face in the video. He smiles, Trump smiles, he frowns, Trump frowns. This is using an off-the-shelf webcam. This is not specialized equipment at all. And combine that with technology we now have that allows you to generate convincing audio in anyone's voice, and we get situations like this. Have a listen.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
I love Jordan Peele because he makes it funny, but it's actually terrifying. It's terrifying. And here are there are two possible kind of bad directions that this could go in. The first one is the sort of obvious one, like the overt one, where someone makes a video with malicious intent. Someone makes a video of Donald Trump saying, I've just given the order to send missiles over to North Korea, and it doesn't even have to be perfect. Like if you're looking closely, you can see some artifacts in that video, you know, and plus that's actually Jordan Peele doing the impression, whatever. Like, it doesn't even have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough to provoke a knee-jerk reaction. That's one potentially kind of negative trajectory that this could take. But the other one is even more insidious. So this, forgive me, I know this is super US-centric. I'm aware I have a problem. I'm seeking help. But I cannot tear myself away from the train wreck that is US politics right now. So you may or may not know that during the 2016 US presidential election, there was a tape that came out. It was like the infamous Billy Bush tape. That was Donald Trump on a bus with this guy, Billy Bush, and he was bragging about sexually assaulting women. And the tape came out, and he apologized for it and said, you know, yep, that was me. And Melania said, oh, it's just boy talk, don't worry about it. Okay, that was 2016. A couple months ago, when this tech comes out, he starts going on interviews saying, you know, actually, remember that tape? They're saying it might not even have been my voice on that tape. And so we get to a situation where we literally cannot believe anything we see or hear, even with video evidence, which is like the ultimate gold standard of evidence. And we're getting to a point where we can't rely even on that. Who do we trust? How do we know what's true? It's a hugely challenging time, and as of right now, we don't have a solution for it. Adobe's just coming out in process of working on some AI that can automatically detect photoshopped still images. Nobody yet has the tech that can automatically detect this kind of stuff. So that's the terror, stuff that keeps me up at night. But F. Scott Fitzgerald said that the mark of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously and still retain the ability to function. By many metrics, 2017 was the best year ever in human history. In 2017, the smallest share of our population ever was hungry, impoverished, or illiterate. Every single day in 2017, 217,000 people were lifted up out of extreme poverty. Every single day in 2017, 325,000 people gained access to electricity, and every single day, 300,000 people gained access to clean drinking water. In 2017, for the first time ever, in certain parts of the world, it became cheaper to build and operate a new solar plant than it was to maintain an existing coal plant. Think about that for a second. Cheaper to build a whole new plant than to maintain the existing coal plant. All of your sunk cost arguments go completely out the window, and now we've reached a point where the right thing to do for the planet is aligning with the right thing to do for your bottom line, and that will generate a total tipping point in terms of our energy production and consumption. So these are all super complicated topics that have lots of, I'm sure for lots of things I've said, there are going to be people in this room who've been like, but what about, but can we talk about, but haven't you thought about, but you're wrong because, right, all of those things are absolutely valid responses. And so as a result, I think we need to be rethinking the role of leadership in a world that is so complex and ambiguous, that is driving towards such fundamental changes in our kind of societal OS. We need to be rethinking our roles as leaders. And leadership is another one of those words, like sustainability, where there are a million different definitions of it, and there are dozens of PhD programs that you can do on this. I am not an expert on leadership, but I've been observing this for a while, and I would like to focus on three facets of leadership that I think are going to be essential in an exponential world. And the first one is the need to come back to first principles. Our typical response as leaders, as business leaders, as people in our community, our typical response to disruption is to go, how can we adapt so that we can keep doing what we're doing? We have a big business, we go, how can we adapt to this disruption so we can keep having a big business? We have a government, we go, how can we adapt to this disruption so that we can keep delivering the services of government? We have a school, how can we adapt to this disruption so that kids will keep coming to our school? So our kind of end game is to keep doing what we've been doing, but I think those things need to be questioned. This is just an example, adapt to the disruptive market or fail. So we have a business, there's no way we can let it fail. We have to adapt to the disruptive market so that we can keep our business going. But I think we need to take a step back and start questioning some of the underlying assumptions behind that response, behind the way that we've structured things in the first place. We need to be asking questions like, is it right that corporations should be incentivized to maximize shareholder value? Questions like, should we really be educating people to have jobs? Questions like, should we really be training ourselves that the measure of success in society is based on having a 40-hour work week? These are all assumptions. We think they're facts because we've ingrained them, we've integrated them so much into the way that we operate, but we forget that we made this kind of stuff up. I'm going to pick just one of these because I don't have a huge amount of time. I'm going to pick just one of these to examine slightly. The whole idea that a corporation exists to maximize shareholder value is so ingrained in our society that most people think it's the law. It is absolutely not the law. The concept that corporations exist to maximize shareholder value was first put forward by this guy, Milton Friedman, in 1970 in an article in the New York Times. And it's been adopted and repeated so much that we completely forget that that is not the way things have to be. And to me, it's absolutely bizarre that we think that's the way things have to be. It's totally bizarre and kind of crazy that we have social enterprises over here and like real companies over there. That just makes no sense to me at all, because you, as a human person, not a legal person like a corporation, you as a human person, you have legal responsibilities in society, and you also have moral and civic responsibilities. If your neighbor is trapped, you're going to help your neighbor get out. You're going to show up to the community meeting. You're going to help your kid's school board. Like, we all have responsibilities to each other as human citizens, and it's totally insane that our corporate persons would not have similar kinds of responsibilities. And that's not just a radical hippie thing to say. This is Larry Fink. He's the chief executive of BlackRock. It's the biggest asset management company in the world. They have over $6 trillion under management. And Larry Fink, in January of this year, sent a letter to the chief executive of every single company that they're invested in. And he said, if you do not have a social purpose, we are going to divest our shares. They're taking positions on the boards. They're leveraging their status as activist shareholders to basically force all of these companies to have social positions as well as financial ones. That's the first aspect of leadership that I want to talk about. The second one I want to talk about is moral character. So often, we hear people saying that we want this place to be the Silicon Valley of whatever, the Silicon Valley of the East Coast, the Silicon Valley of Asia, the Silicon Valley of the Southern Hemisphere, the Silicon Valley of New Zealand. But I would argue that there is kind of a vacuum of leadership coming out of Silicon Valley right now, certainly a vacuum of moral character, right? Silicon Valley is spitting out leaders like Travis Kalanick from Uber, or Elizabeth Holmes, the completely fraudulent chief executive of Theranos, a blood testing company. Or even Mark Zuckerberg. And Mark Zuckerberg, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, right? But the scale at which his decisions have impact is such that we have to hold the leaders of these organizations to such a higher standard than we otherwise would, right? When you're operating at that scale, anything potentially becomes hazardous. A few marshmallows are yum. A lot of marshmallows are dangerous. Like, we just have to be rethinking things in the age of the kind of scale at which we're operating. And really, the question that we need to be asking about everything that we're talking about, like certainly when it comes to tech, if we're asking the question, can we, the answer is going to be yes. Can we create an AI that can, take over the human functions in our organization? Yes. Can we solve this problem with robots? Yes. Can we connect all the people in the world? Yes. The answer to everything, if the question is can we, the answer is almost certainly yes. It's the wrong question. The question we should be asking is not can we, but should we? And luckily, we are seeing people come out from Silicon Valley and from elsewhere around the world who are showing this kind of moral character. People like Tristan Harris, who's leading the Time Well Spent movement to try to get people to take back control over their attention. I've got 3 small stepsons, 10, 8, and 4 years old. We talk all the time about how the people who create the computer games that they love so much don't have their best interests at heart. That those games are designed to capture and hold their attention, and that their job to become fully actualized adults, their job is to understand and regain control over their own attention, to choose consciously when they want to play and when they don't want to play. That's the second characteristic. The third characteristic I want to talk about with leadership is agency. And to get into this, I just want to show you a little clip from a wonderful TEDx talk. This is Dave Meslin at TEDx Toronto maybe 8 years ago. There's audio here. I'm going to back it up so you can get the audio going. Do we have audio? No audio? Oh.
Heroes. How do we view leadership? Look at these 10 movies. What do they have in common? Anyone? They all have heroes who were chosen. Someone came up to them and said, "You're the chosen one. There's a prophecy. You have to save the world." And then someone goes off and saves the world because they've been told to, with a few people tagging along. This helps me understand why a lot of people have trouble seeing themselves as leaders, because it sends all the wrong messages about what leadership is about. A heroic effort is a collective effort, number one. Number two, it's imperfect. It's not very glamorous, and it doesn't suddenly start and suddenly end. It's an ongoing process your whole life. But most importantly, it's voluntary. It's voluntary. As long as we're teaching our kids that heroism starts when someone scratches a mark on your forehead, or someone tells you that you're part of a prophecy, they're missing the most important characteristic of leadership, which is that it comes from within. It's about following your own dreams uninvited, and then working with others to make those dreams come true.
I show this because I feel like so often when we're talking about leadership, people go, "Oh, well, that's not me. I'm not the boss. I'm not the chief executive. I'm not on the board. I'm not the owner." But the point I think that Dave is making is that every single one of us has this capacity to be a leader if we see ourselves as leaders. Every single one of us has a sphere of influence in which we operate. And these issues are so huge and so important that every single one of us should be exercising our leadership capabilities within those spheres of influence that we have. And to the degree that we find this stuff important, we should be aiming to expand our sphere of influence so that we can have a more positive impact. The future doesn't happen to us. The future is created by us. So we have to exercise that leadership capability in order to be more intentional and intelligent about the kind of future we're creating. I think our biggest challenge today is not how can we adapt for the future. The biggest and most important challenge that I see us having today is what kind of future do we want to create? Thank you very much.